Hey everyone, welcome back to the Her Resources podcast. In our last episode, we talked about something that many leaders don't see until it's too late: burnout. Not the loud kind, but the quiet kind. The kind that shows up as disengagement, in silence, and even in people slowly pulling back. And we talked about the gap between what leaders think is happening inside their organization and what employees are actually experiencing. We also touched on something important: that many leaders are trying to solve deeply human challenges without always having the right visibility or support to do well. Which brings us to today, because more and more organizations are turning to technology and specifically AI, not just to drive efficiency, but to better support their people. And I think this is where the conversation starts to shift, because for a long time, the narrative around AI has been, will it replace jobs? Will it remove the human element from work? But what if we're asking the wrong question? What if AI could actually help us become more human in how we lead? What if it could help leaders better understand their people, support them earlier, and create environments where individuals can actually grow and thrive? That's exactly what we're exploring today. I'm continuing the conversation with Diane Weaver, and we're talking about how technology, when designed intentionally, can actually strengthen connection, not replace it, including the work being done at Baryons, where they've built a voice-based AI flourishing partner, a tool that's designed to act more like a coach than a system. It's not about monitoring people, it's about supporting them, helping individuals reflect, grow, and navigate challenges in real time, while also giving organizations better insight into where teams may be struggling or even misaligned. So today we're exploring a different perspective, not AI versus humanity, but how AI can actually help us lead more humanly. Welcome to the new chapter of the Her Resources podcast. I'm your host, Linda Misakadis, and I'm so excited to be stepping into this next season with you solo. This podcast has always been about amplifying women's voices, exploring the challenges we face in HR, leadership, and life, and sharing the tools and inspiration we need to thrive. And now, I'm taking that mission even deeper. You'll hear real conversations with bold and authentic women, as well as reflections from me on everything from pay equity and burnout to confidence, leadership, and the messy, beautiful journey of growth. This is more than just a podcast, it's a community, a space for us to learn, lead, and lift each other up. Welcome to this new beginning. This is the Her Resources podcast. Let's get started. Diane, welcome back.
Thank you so much for having me, Linda. It's great to be back.
Oh, I'm so glad to see you. And I was so excited after our last episode and just really having the opportunity to talk through this. And it really did get me thinking, especially because your background in technology, it's not like you're new on the scene, that you just showed up in the AI boom. You've been around a while and you've been following these technology trends for a while. So hearing your perspective was really helpful for me to think about, maybe we're approaching this all in the wrong way. Maybe we're putting too much around viewing it negatively and not positively enough, which is why I'm excited about today. Like, how can we help organizations shift really from more fear to opportunity?
Mm. Yeah, that is just a beautiful setting of the table, as we say.
Yes. Yeah. No, I'm excited to dive into this, because why do you think conversations around AI need to evolve? Because I do think that right now there is a lot of negativity around it, and understandably so. It
Yes.
is still very unknown to the common person, right? So as we were talking in our last episode, AI is not actually new from a technology perspective, but as we were also discussing, all of a sudden we all had access to a tool that was crazy powerful. And we keep hearing the doomsday sayers telling us that essentially all human jobs are going to go away and will all be eventually replaced by AI and robots. So you understand where the negativity is coming from. So why do we need to change this conversation around AI?
Yeah, absolutely. It is the negativity is coming from such an understandable place. And yet, it is uniquely human to feel a full range of emotions about something, right? And so when I think about why it's so important to stay positive or have a sense of a growth mindset
Mhm.
about the change and the transformation that's happening at every single level right now,
Right.
I think, well, that is inherently human to have hope, right? It's inherently human to have hope for our future. It's inherently human to want to bring goodness into the world. It's inherently human to want to pay things forward and to really create a better future for our children and our grandchildren and et cetera,
Yeah.
the future of humanity, right?
Right,
So
right.
so it's always a really delicate balance and dance. And I think when we look at chapters in history where there was major transformation or majorly negative events, especially on a global scale, and this truly is a speed and a scale that we have not encountered before. So it is
Sure.
different, and I want to acknowledge that. But throughout each of those chapters and each of those generations who have gone through it, I like to call it's Dickinsonian. It's the best of times and the worst of times, right?
Right.
And
Yes, yeah.
I think in that is kind of the source of hope, and our survival depends on our ability to retain hope and to positively move forward into the future. And, I one of my favorite current scientists today, her name is Beth Rudin, and I think I mentioned her on the last podcast, but she's just so prolific and easy to quote.
Yeah.
But I love how she put it. She said, um, worry in itself is a positive thing because it gives us the energy to act. It
Okay.
forces us to be grounded and present and snap to attention. Now I'm, like, proliferating in my own words here.
Yeah.
But, like, if we think about worry as kind of, almost a tool that is accessible to us, when we are worried, we're concerned about the impact, the future, the now, the next, and the later,
Mhm.
and all of the ramifications, and it truly is, like, an important emotion to feel worry and concern, because
Sure.
that's what motivates us to show up from an active stance and not a passive stance. And
That makes
so,
sense.
yeah. So even in, like, the fear-mongering that
Mhm.
happens everywhere, there's
Yes.
a silver lining to that because, at least we're talking about it, at least we're talking about it very openly, and broadly. And then hopefully we're talking about it so broadly that we're starting to encounter other perspectives and points of view because certainly there it's also very regional. It's certain industries are embracing it more than other industries. Certain regions are embracing it more than other regions around the world. So that in itself is really fascinating.
That is. It makes a lot of sense. Well, and I think that the primary focus has really been on it being an efficiency tool. And it's like, how can it help us be more efficient, more effective? Not even, I mean, it certainly helps personally, but also it helps organizations. And I see the positive in that. I mean, I think back from my early years of my career when I was reconciling general ledgers or reconciling payroll ledgers and having to it would take me weeks to do what now I could do in minutes and how much time that would have saved me. And then I could have focused in on problem solving what was creating those discrepancies instead of trying to find those discrepancies. And so there, I can definitely see a lot of benefit in it. But there's a shift, I think, around what Baryon is doing in the conversation we've been having, which is that it's not just about it being an efficiency tool, but what if we actually used it as a human development tool, which is the idea that, AI is not replacing people, but actually supporting people, right? In a very, it can be viewed in a very positive way, which is kind of what the whole idea around what Baryon is doing is creating AI as a personal growth partner more than just an efficiency tool or replacing another human, right?
Yes, absolutely. So we like to think of baryons as your support team. There are four really powerful components to this, and they help to either establish or reinforce or maintain or grow certain habits and behaviors that we know are associated with high performance and with happiness. And I'm saying these words in a very science-backed, research-based way,
Right.
that
Yeah.
there truly is, science around the Human Flourishing Index by Harvard.
Mhm.
They've done a ton of research on, like, what creates these environments where humans can, feel happy or feel fulfilled. And so these four, components, and we call it your support team, they
Okay.
are a it's and it's all the same phone call. It's all the same number that you dial in and you talk to your baryon. So when I
Yeah.
call into my baryon, I can call in and it can help me plan my day. It can help me
Okay.
do what we call a check-in, and it can
Mhm.
help me, reflect on my day and see how it went. Both of those are really powerful visualization tools that are used by, top executives and performance athletes, and we know when we arrive and set our intention, it we it does, like, realign ourselves and we show up differently, right?
Right.
And then the next support, we call it a thinking partner, and that's where,
Okay.
we've trained the AI to, to do certain tasks for you and to be helpful in these kind of ways. But even more importantly, to help you with, also organizing your thoughts, things like role play, preparing for different activities, and creating different artifacts, and it will email you these things as you co-create with it. That's a really great one to use in the car or walking the dog
Yeah.
or something. But then my favorite support in this support team is the growth partner, and this one is specifically about, flourishing. And, it's really rooted deeply in human flourishing. And we all know that when you get stuck at work, it's usually something personal that's, like,
Mhm.
kind of holding you back or blocking you. And so there's work to be done, right? So it does help you. It will ask you questions and help you kind of talk through and reflect, not in an overly positive way, but in a way
Yeah.
that just, like, sparks your curiosity and, like, "Oh, I've never really thought about it that way. Let's dig deeper," right?
Right.
So
Yeah.
in that way, what we're trying to introduce into the workplace and normalize there is that, like, you bring your whole person to your work.
Mhm.
And
Right.
especially as with all the demands that current workday requires, we're
Right.
supposed to be on and performative, and we're
Mhm.
also supposed to be authentic, and we're supposed to be empathetic, and supposed
Right.
we're supposed to, like, get our agenda done or
Yes.
close the initiative or whatever, and at the same time, like, not put too much pressure. I mean, it's a tremendous list of what might seem like kind of opposing ideas or opposites. And
Yeah.
what we're really doing here is dancing. And to just maintain our mental health and our brain capacity and our brain health, it really does require creating space throughout our day to give ourselves, those grounding moments. And even better, when you can work through it with a thought partner.
I have exciting news. The Her Resources podcast is opening sponsorships. If your brand supports women in HR and leadership, think talent, well being, learning, pay equity, coaching, productivity, or mission driven tech. This is your moment. Our listeners are decision makers and change makers who show up for real conversations and practical tools every week. We offer flexible options, pre-roll or mid-roll host reads, series sponsorships, and thought leadership integrations that highlight your story without the fluff. Ready to connect with a highly engaged audience and grow with us? Email contact@herresourcespodcast.com and put sponsorship in the subject line. I can't wait to collaborate. So I don't want to be presumptuous that our listeners know what flourishing means. Can you talk about you can make the assumption of what you think flourishing means, but can you tell everybody what do you mean when you're talking about flourishing?
Yeah. So yes, I love this question. I love that you asked that question because when you're having your first growth partner conversation with Baryons,
Mhm.
it asks you to describe what is your best day. What is
Okay.
what does that look like? Tell me,
Yeah.
what are you spending your time doing? How does it feel? Who are you talking to? And then from that, it helps you kind of arrive at your own definition of flourishing. And that's a really critical component here because the sense of autonomy and the sense of choice is really critical. Agency is really critical to flourishing in itself. And so if you feel like someone else's idea of flourishing is forced upon you, it's not going to feel like flourishing. So
Right.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's
No,
really
that's really
interesting.
true.
Yeah.
And what I hear you saying, and I know this is something that you talk about, is that it's increasing the AI quotient and self-awareness, right? And so it's helping people think better, not just work faster. And
Mhm.
to your point, we've put a lot of pressure, especially I think on middle manager and leaders. We talk about, you mentioned bringing your whole self to work. That's only really been something that we've talked about over the last several years of this idea of being authentic in the workplace and bringing our whole selves and creating psychological safety. There are all of these conversations because that all comes with that. Because if I bring my whole self to work, I have to trust that my whole self is going to be accepted at work, right? And that I'm not going to be treated differently or judged in a different way because of that. And that's really tough. And so I'm
Mhm.
wondering, does this maybe help as well? Because it helps us to kind of think better, maybe process those emotions, or even think about how we show up. Because I was saying this all the time when we first really started bringing out the whole idea of the authentic self. And I'm like, what do you really mean when you say authentically? Because I could say, well, if I'm just an asshole, does that mean that I get to just be an asshole at work? I mean, if that's where I'm defining my authentic self, and no, of
Right.
course it doesn't.
No.
So it's like, what do we really mean when we talk about these things?
Yeah, yes. This is really just like such a critical question because it depends so much on your culture. It depends on the teaming that happens. And, as I say that, like we have so many examples of culture going toxic or sideways, and there's good intentions at first and then it goes too far,
Yes.
and rightfully so to have guardrails on there. And so, I think I think what showing up authentically means to me in the workplace, it's showing up with a level of vulnerability where you can be curious, where you can ask questions, where you can push on, you can push on certain things. You can fail fast and recover
Yeah.
quickly,
Yeah.
and where you can challenge each other. And I think that when the authenticity is framed that way, and like what does appropriate, authentic showing up to work or teaming or group work, actually look like? Those are
Yeah.
the things that I think of. And of course, everyone interprets it very differently.
Yes,
So
that is so true. Yeah. Well, and I might have a leader who is completely comfortable with allowing their team to show up in that way. We feel safe. We feel, like we have that psychological safety. We feel supported. But in that very same organization, there can be another leader who does not behave in that way. And so, again, it kind of comes back to that notion of creating this illusion of an umbrella corporate culture, and we're all operating symbiotically and we all feel the same way. And that, I think, really came out during the big marketing push of DEI, because that's how I view that. Like, that was a
Mhm.
big marketing push around companies trying to capitalize on something that is so important, but it became a marketing and a branding and a culture thing, and that pushed too far.
Uh,
And so then we saw where it pushed too far into organizations, and that in and of itself created separation within organizations as well too, because you had people who didn't buy into it and you had people who were like all into it. And now it created like the reverse situation in that, where the people who maybe weren't as overly supportive, now suddenly they felt like they were on the outs, versus, the way maybe it had been in the past. And so it's interesting in trying to force that upon an organization and force that into employees and managers, that you're almost go doing the opposite of what you're trying to accomplish.
it is so true. It's so true. It's a very basic physics principle, that as soon as you start observing particles, they act differently. And as soon as we start observing people, we act
Yeah,
differently.
that's
And
true.
so when you're clear and open about and transparent about what you're observing, you are you have to really think twice about how you frame that, because you might be incentivizing, like you're saying, exactly the opposite behavior than you want. And
Right, yeah.
so it does get very tricky. And I think that the DEI example is an excellent example here, because we have seen a pendulum swing, and it's
Mhm.
become so politicized that it's very divisive. And in very large
Yeah.
organizations, you have like legal regulations and things that are in place. And so that umbrella statement, cultural
Mhm.
statement, does have to be very cookie cutter and meet those standards.
Right.
Um, but then in execution, you see all variety, right, of
Oh, yeah.
execution from team to team. So then it becomes really fascinating inside the petri dish, right?
Yeah, yes.
So, so that one is super interesting, and I think that it just compounds even more when you start to um, like translate culture and strategic initiatives into things like KPIs.
Right.
Because then suddenly, like, your livelihood depends on these things that are being observed and measured, right? And so all of this is such an interesting, delicate balance. And There's 1,000 ways to do it wrong and very few ways to
Right.
do it right.
That is so true, yes.
Yeah,
No, I totally agree. Well,
yeah.
and what's interesting about that, and it's a good transition, on from data to understanding, which is you kinda hinted to that in our last episode where you were talking about the reporting that's available now through Varyon, that you're working on, and it's kind of taking that turning that soft human experiences into actual usable and insight. So talk about how that can really help leaders take a better and more human-centered action in their organizations.
Yes. So this is one of my favorite things because I do come from a big data background. When I was in ed tech, I used to work with teams that worked on, we called them statewide longitudinal data systems. And
Okay.
basically, we connected every single database across a state and then across all 50 states
Oh, wow.
that connected learning and development assessment data. And this was pre-K to gray. And so, and we know, even when you finish your degree or diploma, we never stop learning, right? And you do all these like, trainings and continuing education credits. Anyway, all of that data is reported on, when you're learning from an institution that meets accreditation and standards, they report back to the state so that they can maintain that accreditation standard. So, this is where I really learned that working with large data sets is often like working with Swiss cheese. And there's
Okay.
so much context lost. And when you're looking at that data set, it's especially, when we're talking about workforce data, it's so often a once a year survey or
Right.
a transactional feedback loop, that's happening. And so it's like, well, was that just a really bad day? Were there layoffs the week before they sent out the survey? Was there, you know, was there any number of things can really like influence that data set. So what we're so often missing in our performance data is the human context. And so
Sure.
because everyone across the company is having these like conversations with their baryon, we're able to surface. Now, number one, your conversation with your baryon is private, and nobody will ever have access to your transcripts or your words, etc. But if 2 or 3 or 4 or 10 people are talking about the same project, the same place that they're getting stuck, the same frustration, the same win, right? Even positive things, the
Right.
same
Yeah.
win, the same like, "Oh, I'm just so relieved that this happened and there was closure," like whatever it is, right? Then those kind of things where multiple people in the group are saying it, those kind of things surface up into a group report. And I'm just pulling up a group report now because I want to be because it's exciting what we can show in these things, but also because I want to be accurate. So the first thing that you see in a group report, and we call this a leadership resonance report, because
Okay.
it's important that these things are it's the context, right? It's
Yeah.
and so number one, it's as the leader is reading through this report, the first question is, does this resonate with you and your perception of reality? And then
Oh,
number 2, the question to be thinking about is, how is this truly a reflection of what's resonating for my team and their perception of reality? Because of the whole, dynamic of if I'm a leader and I'm having all of these engagement points and a very like
Mhm.
kind of rich engaged experience, but I don't know how isolated people on my team might be or feel. And because
Right.
of that, they might see and feel different things than I do. And so the first thing that it does is it tells you, like how many people participated in having conversations with their baryons this week, and it's out of the total numbers. So if you had a team during the last podcast, we started talking about how like impossible the nurse manager role is
Yes.
because
Yeah.
they may have 100 direct reports, and
Right.
so so if you had 100 direct reports, that are kind of surfacing, these insights are surfacing up in this report, then it would tell you, yeah, like, 94 out of 100 people called into their baryon, and overall the group is steady or they're stretched
Okay.
or they're energized. Basically, like think of a battery. There's kind of a battery, graphic that shows your team energy, and then it shows kind of the distribution of that because there might be some variation within there.
Yeah.
If you're talking about a really small group, it's not going to reveal that because it would then, the whole point is that this is very private, right? And we're
Right.
trying to look at trends that are showing us the leading signals, not the lagging signals.
That makes sense,
So
yeah.
another really cool component of this part is like what goes into that battery of team energy are
Mhm.
there are drivers and there are drainers. And
Okay.
so your drivers might look like, the deep work and technical flow is going really well on Fridays because there's a team rule that we don't do meetings on Fridays. So
Okay.
that's driving energy. People are talking about
Yeah.
that positively, right? And then a drainer might be something like feeling like there's strategic misalignment or the
Mm.
mixed signals in what we're doing, or why.
Right.
Those things will show up, at a high level. So the and then at the end of the report, it always will give the leader what we call something to sit with. And this is like
Okay.
an inspiration. So
Okay.
it's like, you know, it's asking them an essential question. So I'll just read you ours for here at
Yeah.
Baryons. So this is for my co-founder. I'm co-founder and COO, but this is specifically for the person who's the leader on this report is my co-founder and CEO, Mike.
Right.
So this is for him. It says, your team is successfully using math to solve product problems and valuation gaps. How can you now apply that same mathematical rigor to the team's calendar and ensure their kinetic output doesn't exceed their potential capacity? Basically, it's like there are too many meetings on everyone's calendars. They're doing a lot of work, right?
Right.
So it's all very interesting. Oh, and there's one other section that I wanted to point out. Well, two others, team wins. So that's where it's like surfacing here are all the wins that the group is excited about. And
Right.
then a section where it's red, yellow, green, and here are the
Okay.
things to act on, here are the things
Okay.
to watch, and here are the things to amplify.
Are you ready to take your podcast to the next level? Let LJM Productions help you sound your best. We specialize in podcast editing, production, audio restoration, and mixing, ensuring every episode is polished, professional, and ready to wow your audience. Whether you're just starting out or a seasoned podcaster, we'll handle the technical details so you can focus on sharing your voice. Partner with LJM Productions today and hear the difference.
I'm wondering, Diane, does it take some of the subjectivity out of it? And I ask because I was listening to something the other day, and one of the leaders, so they were reviewing the survey results from their organization. And one of the things that they were talking about was that the employees felt like communication wasn't very good. So from a survey result, it was really lagging. Now, the leader of the organization who was presenting these said, "Well, I think that communication is really good at the organization. I think that maybe." So they're making up what they think is the problem, right? Because
Yeah.
now it's what their opinion is. Now, somebody else came on and said, "Well, I think that the reason why people are responding the way that they are, because it's not that we don't communicate a lot of information at the organization, but we don't explain the why behind things are happening." So that's where employees, so again, it's a lot of subjectivity around my interpretation, or really my own personal feelings, honestly, as to how I'm determining how to read that information. Does this change that, and does that remove some of that subjectivity?
That is the big hope. And I am going to go back to hope because this technology used in this way is very early. But
Okay.
we do know from research that we have been, that has been driving products and services that we've built in the past and throughout the past. That body of research really does say that understanding each other's perspectives is critical to moving
Mhm.
faster. It's critical to our decision quality as leadership and the ability of the team to execute on the decisions that are made. Um,
Okay.
because when there's a misalignment like you're talking about, where the
Mhm.
leader, of course, they're going to think that the communication is good. They're probably
Yeah,
creating some of that communication. The
exactly.
leader is in a communication position, or they're receiving
Right.
more communication than their direct reports may be receiving.
Mhm.
They they have access to that.
It's
And
very true.
yeah. And so this is part of, when that there's kind of in business and the study of business and how we team together and work. There's kind of six areas of effective workplaces that we like to talk about. One is coordination, the next one is shared reality, being able to see risk early, decision quality, engagement, and learning velocity. And so shared reality is really what you're talking about. That's where we get alignment, misalignment, multiple perspectives. A lot of friction and conflict happen because my perspective of the reality of the situation is different than someone else's perspective. So now we have
Right.
a conflict. Or if our KPIs are working against each other, that's going
Mhm.
to reinforce a different sense of reality.
Right.
in-
Yeah.
around the same work to be done. And
Yeah.
so this is where it 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 isn't necessary for, like, assimilation is not necessary.
Okay.
It's
Right, right.
we want to avoid the Borg.
Yep, that's
Um,
exactly where my mind went, was the Borgs and assimilation, yeah.
yes. So, that's just, like, this is the easiest way I can communicate that, but, like, it's not necessary to assimilate, but it is necessary to have, like, rules of engagement so that when we do have different perspectives and our concept of a shared reality is fractured, it's really important that it's not just like, again, because of human agency and how important that is, especially in Western cultures, is that if we come in as a leader, as a company, and we say, uh, and again, this is all in the framing and how we deliver it, right? And
Right.
and incentivize it too, because sometimes you do need to come in with just, like, very clear, direct orders. You always
Right.
need to be
Yeah.
clear and direct. You always have to be clear and
Absolutely.
but if you come in, with a hammer and not a velvet hammer, then it's not going to work. I don't know how
That's true.
so,
Yeah, that
because,
is true.
because it's important to have all once you have identified multiple perspectives,
Mhm.
your, shared reality capacity actually increases. It grows.
Okay.
If you
Okay.
think about it as a tent, then you can collectively as a team decide, "Oh, yeah, we actually did not consider this aspect or this use case or
Right.
this type of customer or didn't realize that we had that many customers that need this instead of
Yeah.
that," right? And so that tent can expand, right?
Okay.
And then this shared reality now has space for those additional perspectives. There will be perspectives that do not belong in the tent. And then
Sure.
that's when, you figure out what's best for you. Is it the, we just have to get on board message, or
Mhm.
is it the let's talk through it, or how can we work through this and get you there
Right.
kind of thing. Yeah.
That makes sense because what I hear you say is like we're not suggesting that companies or organizations are going to be able to accommodate everyone's feelings and emotions about situations. But what is helpful is that at least if you have a greater understanding of what's driving the behavior, you can at least look to your point, I like your tent analogy there, you can determine on like, well, who belongs in that tent? Because to your point, there are going to be some people who it doesn't matter what you do, how much you communicate, what you provide to them, they're never gonna be happy, and that's just who they are, and that's not the organization's responsibility to fix that. But if you're looking towards how can we solve to the trends that we're starting to see, and we can target that. So maybe we know where this particular team is stuck, or maybe we know this team is overwhelmed, or maybe this team is misaligned. That's where we can start to use that information in a way that helps to move things forward instead of either standing still or living in that false reality that everything is great when it's not. So,
Yes. Yeah, yes.
yeah.
I couldn't agree more, and I just so, like, one more point on that front too is that, when we're talking about this concept of shared reality, I always
Mhm.
think of okay, this is kind of, funny and a little storytelling, but do you remember that TV show, Undercover Boss?
Yes.
Did you
Yes.
ever
Yeah.
watch that? So, it was, I mean, it was early reality TV.
Yeah.
They uncovered a lot of weird things. I mean,
They did.
pretty much it only became an episode if something crazy happened.
Right.
But the thing that comes back to my mind about that show and about what we're doing at Baryons, there is a connection here, I promise, is
Uh-huh.
is that at the end of the show, the CEO always said, "I never realized that X was
Yes.
was
Yep.
happening," or, "I never realized that the customer felt this way or that customers actually wanted this other thing, and it's like as leaders, and it's so human, we are so focused and driven on our
Mhm.
objectives and
Right.
what we know worked in the past, which
Mhm.
all of like a lot of that is is up for reinterpretation
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
moving forward things are looking very different.
Yeah.
And so it's just critical to be in the know of the experiences of every person across your company. Your front lines
Yeah.
are critical for those insights of where this needs to go next because
Mhm.
they're in the weeds. They're doing the day to day. They're the ones who know, well, we can't automate this workflow because we do X, Y, and Z manually, and it's not even documented anywhere. Everything's
So
in a
true.
book, right?
Yes. Yes,
So
yes.
it's, if you really wanna see what's coming up in market trends, if you really wanna see, what are your customer needs that would be so easy
Mhm.
to fulfill that might be a new line of revenue or a new product opportunity for you. If you want to see, like, what are those real needs as you're reimagining your workflows and getting
Mhm.
ready for automation, you have to be in touch with the people who are actually doing that day-to-day work. So,
Yeah.
the undercover boss idea, is kind of it's an
Yeah.
easy way to be like, "Oh, yeah, that is really valuable."
Hey everyone, we're the Her Resources podcast, where women share real stories, real lessons, and the resources that help them succeed. We're always looking for inspiring women, business leaders, creatives, educators, and changemakers who want to share their journey and empower others. If that sounds like you, we'd love to hear your story. Reach out to us at contact@herresourcespodcast.com and let's start the conversation. You're right, and we don't think about it through that lens, but that is a really good analogy, I think, because you can see the comparison there and the similarities behind what happens when you take a step back and people don't realize that, so they are being more honest, more truthful in the way that they're approaching things, and so you do see a different side of it, which is what we learned through all of that. I was at a conference a few years ago, and one of the things that they were talking about there was they were making some changes to technology. It was a government conference, and they were making changes to a technology that they felt was going to be really beneficial. But what I really appreciated about what they did is they created multi-generational user communities
Mhm.
because it was technology, they were making the assumption that, well, everybody uses technology, so it's going to be so simple and everybody. And what they learned through that would which seems so crazy that they wouldn't have thought of this in the first place. But what they learned through all of that was that not everybody is comfortable with technology. And so, if you're going to make that shift or make that transition, well, what about, and maybe in that particular area, your demographics were a much older demographic. And these are not people who you were all of a sudden just going to say, well, you have to go buy a computer and you have to learn how to use this and do. They needed alternative paths forward. So the good thing that came out of all of that is that while they could still leverage the technology, they also couldn't just throw out all of those processes that where maybe I'm going to go down to my local government office to transact that particular business, and you're going to have somebody there who can work with me to do that. Now, it could minimize the amount of people because if you could do everything else online to accommodate that generation. But I thought it was interesting, but I was really impressed with that they had thought about doing that and just thinking about the impact that that was going to have on the different constituents that they serve. So it's similar to what we're talking about in corporations as well, is that you have a lot of different personalities, you have different skill sets, you have all of these things. It's important to have a good handle and understanding on all of those things, and the best way to do that is through these types of tools, honestly.
It's so true. It's so true. And technology use across multiple generations is a perfect example of how wrong our biases can be
Yes.
and how varied people's experiences are. And kind of where their blockers are kind of originating from too. Because it's it's often the when we are measuring humans, it's
Mhm.
often the question that we also have to ask ourselves as researchers and analysts is, are we measuring their ability to complete the task with this tool or to complete the task? Are
Oh, that's really good. Yeah,
Yes.
I like that. Yeah.
Yes, because it's like, if somebody shows up to, an on-the-job assessment, or let's
Mhm.
say they are getting, a recertified, or something like that, and surprise, we have a whole new technology that you get to do this from, and it's so
Yes.
easy. But if that person is like, "Oh my god, I'm not
Yeah.
I don't I don't do well with something new, or
Right.
something sprung on me, or I have, like, test anxiety to begin with,"
Right.
then you really have to ask all of those questions of, like, are is the assessment itself, or the way that we're measuring, these folks, is that, is that free of bias in itself?
That's true. No, that's a really good point. I love that you said that because I do think that that happens frequently is, there's just inherent bias in how we view things because what's simple to me isn't necessarily what's simple to you and vice versa. And so, and we both, maybe we have very different learning styles as well. And so thinking through all of that. So, in order for this technology to work, you have to really strengthen the trust through the transparency of the tool, right? And so, if we're trying to say, if leaders are thinking about utilizing these or organizations are thinking about using these types of tools, what should they be saying or doing to build trust around them? Because you mentioned a couple times, and I do think it was really important for you to mention this, is that if I'm engaging with this tool, that's all completely 100 confidential because a lot of times why employees don't participate in employee service surveys is they do not believe that those are confidential surveys. And so therefore they're like, well, I'm not going to say what I really think because maybe I'm in a small team. And so it would be really easy to know that that was my voice. So I'm not going to say something. So talk a little bit about like, how do we transition to that? Because I do think that's also one, it's fear, but two, it's also, maybe there's not a lot of trust in believing that these tools truly are confidential.
Yes, and for good reason. Again,
Mhm.
it's worth worrying about because then we do show up to the task differently, and
Yes.
I think of it, it's like an onion. And as we peel away this onion, the question that I ask first is there trust within the company? Do the
Okay.
employees trust the employer?
Okay.
Is there trust within the team?
Okay.
And then is there trust between the individuals and AI, like, in the first
Yeah.
place?
That's true.
Because
That's
from
true.
individual to individual, the trust that they need to build might actually be with just talking to an AI in the first place, let alone trust between them and their employer. And then what are we asking them to trust us to do? And I think this is where it's really important, and we do this in our onboarding experience where we frame it that this is a support for you, but it's not your therapist. It's still paid for by your employer. Everything is private, confidential, and secure,
Mhm.
but do try to be mindful of that,
Be discretionary. Yeah, have some
Yes.
discretion, right?
Have
Yeah.
have some discretion. Be mindful that it's AI. Be mindful that
Mhm.
AI makes mistakes. Be mindful
Right.
that this is a tool to support you in processing and working through your own thoughts and emotions. Yes, absolutely. But if you feel like it's going too far, you should go find other support and help too. you know?
Okay. Okay.
And
Yeah.
so there's, like, a lot of guardrails that we've built into the experience
Okay.
to help people kind of reflect on that too,
Okay.
and
Yeah.
to consider, because if I open up to my Baryon and I start talking about something that's deeply personal or traumatic,
Mhm.
then it's going to say, "Do you have someone in your life who you can talk to about
Okay.
this?"
Okay.
And
Yeah.
kind of shift it to a human being. So
Yeah.
one of my favorite things is that we're building an AI experience that is encouraging people to connect with other humans and to get back out into the world. And so
Right.
it will not spend hours talking, like, it will not try to get you to spend hours talking to it. It's gonna
Yeah.
finish the conversation in, like, a check-in conversation average is about 2 minutes or less.
Okay. Okay.
And
Yeah.
yeah, a checkout might be about 5 minutes because you
Okay.
should be doing, like, a cognitive
Yeah.
offload so you can sleep at night, right? And then
Yeah. Absolutely.
and then the other conversations are longer, but we're talking, like, 20 minutes because
Yeah.
it's like, let's really focus in on a place where you're stuck, and then let's
Mhm.
do a micro challenge, and let's get you back out in the world to try it, and call me in a few
Right.
hours or call me tomorrow. And
Yeah.
and, like, one step at a time is really what it's
Right.
focused on.
I'm curious your thoughts on this too, is like making sure that we're positioning the AI tool as a support, not a surveillance, because we saw that happen a lot too when, especially when we were transitioned to a lot of people working from home. Suddenly, organizations were clamoring to find tools to prove that their employees were working because they couldn't visibly see them. So they are just now there was a whole trust issue that was coming through. And so there were silly tools, and employees were learning how to game the systems, right? Because again, when there's no trust, both sides are going to behave in a bad way. And so I'm curious, how do you do that? How do you make sure that you're positioning this so people really do recognize this is a support function, not a surveillance function?
Yeah, yep. First of all, in those group reports, it really does come back to how we do those leadership reports. And it's that, nobody is called out specifically. Your words do not surface verbatim. It's the
Okay.
sentiment. It's the sentiment, it's the context, it's the
Okay.
trend.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, your team is all feeling burned out. And there are several things on our roadmap because we're just getting started, right?
Yeah.
That we will introduce into the market and into the conversation to even further refine that experience and bring humans into the loop and make it less of a report and
Yeah.
more of a communication tool, right? More of a
I
human
like that.
feedback loop. And so if you
Yeah.
think about it like, it's the intent is that it truly is a conversation starter so that
Right.
it's not replacing conversations between the leader and their direct reports, but it's helping to facilitate the conversations that need to happen instead of all
Yeah.
the conversations that are just like fluff, unproductive, don't need
Mhm.
to happen, whatever. And because I mean, there's a lot of time wasted talking about things that don't actually move the needle. And
Yes, there
so,
are.
if we can help to provide that insight, then the leader can really jump into problem solving and let's work through this and let's talk about this openly as a team so that
Mhm.
we so that we so that people can be heard. And so when you mention surveillance tools, I think that's so important here. And we one of the things that we do in our onboarding process with enterprise companies, we bring the leadership team into a meeting with us, and we talk about what is your goal, what is your
Mm.
intent,
Mhm.
and what how do you translate that into what your employees will value? How are you
Right.
going to make this worth their time? What are you going to do with the information once you have it? And like really kind of forcing them to articulate like what do they want to do here? What kind of transformation do they want to have? What level of transparency or involvement do they want? Because our ethos is that the more that you, like, utilize these insights in your conversations just very
Mhm.
transparently and openly, then the more trust you're going to build because people will see, like, "Oh, I feel heard, but I don't feel singled out."
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
And
Yep.
then if the leader is committed to acting on it, then
Even more important. Yeah.
that's where the trust will be built, is in the
I like
action,
that.
which is why we have the section for act, watch, and be aware of. So, yeah.
I love that. Well, I honestly think that this could be one of the biggest shifts in leadership development that we've seen because, and it's also really kind of democratizing, making this available. As we were talking in the last episode, most of the time, coaching, executive coaching, access to that is really limited to. Usually it's like director or above that you see in most organizations.
Yeah.
And so even your middle managers are not getting the advantage of being able to have access to those types of tools. And so I really like this too because it's bringing it down to where everyone gets the benefit of having that type of coach and being able to work with a tool that's going to help them, which ultimately is going to make the company better in the long run. So I love this.
Yeah.
Well, so maybe the future of work isn't actually about choosing between technology and humanity, and maybe it's just about how we bring the two together in a way that actually supports people. Because when technology is designed with intention, which is what I'm hearing from what Diane is saying, and when it's grounded in understanding how people think, how they grow, and how they experience work, it really has the potential to do something very powerful. And it's not replacing connection, it's actually strengthening it in the long run. And it's not removing the human element, it's actually elevating the human element. And if this conversation gave you a new way to think about AI, I know it has me, or how it could support your team, I encourage you to share this episode with another leader or colleague because this is where the conversation is going. And the leaders who lean in thoughtfully are the ones who are going to shape what comes next. And if you haven't already, make sure you're following the Her Resources podcast because in our final episode with Diane on this series, we're bringing it all together in what does a truly healthy workplace actually look like? Not just in theory, but actually in practice. What needs to change? What should leaders prioritize? And how do we build workplaces where people don't just get through the day, but actually thrive throughout the day? So I'll see you in the final episode. Diane, thank you for being here. And remind everyone if they want to learn more about Baryon, where do they go?
Yes, you can just head right on over to baryons.com, baryons.com. And from there, you can click on, I think there's like a try now or start for free button, and it will give you two options. And you can start right away for free, or you can pay $20 a month and just get that single person experience of Baryons right away. And then, of course, if and when you want to take Baryons to work, you can reach out to Baryons, and there's a form there on baryons.com. You can also email sales@baryons.com and inquire that way.
Wonderful. And we'll put all that information in the show notes as well, so you don't have to remember it. But thank you again, Diane, for joining us. And I can't wait for our final episode and really appreciate your time.
Likewise, thank you.
You've been listening to the Her Resources podcast, where women's voices, leadership, and growth take center stage. As your host, I'm here to remind you that the journey isn't always easy, but it is always worth it. Every step you take to build confidence, create impact, or use your voice is part of a much bigger story. It's the one that inspires others to do the same. If this episode spoke to you, I'd love it if you subscribed, left a review, or shared it with another woman who's ready to step into her power. And as always, thank you for being a part of this community. Together, we're not just changing conversations, we're changing the future.